Week 11 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few quarterbacks I have as sleepers this week. The first quarterback, Derek Carr, and then the New Orleans Saints. He played good football last week, but for the majority of the season, injuries and struggles have been a problem for Derek Carr. But the last two games since he returned to the lineup, Week 9 at the Panthers, 236 pass yards, a touchdown. And Week 10 versus the Falcons, a big game, 269 passing, 2 passing touchdowns, and 17 rush yards. So last week, him and Valdez-Scantling hit on some big deep balls down the field to get the fantasy points up. And this week it's a middle of the pack matchup versus the Browns. I give up the 16th most fantasy points to quarterbacks in the season. So right now, if you got bye weeks, injuries, or two quarterback league, Carr's out there in 86% of fantasy leagues, and we know he's going to throw that football around the field. He's a gunslinger and likes that deep ball threat. And maybe this week he'll find it once again as a sleeper option. Next quarterback staying in the same game, Jameis Winston of the Cleveland Browns. So the former New Orleans Saint comes back versus one of his former teams. We'll see if Winston goes out there and has a good game and he wants to stick it to his former team. So in 3 games he's played this season, Week 7 he came in relief in that one, 67 yards, a touchdown, 2-point conversion versus the Bengals. Week 8 versus Baltimore, 334 pass yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 rush yards, a fumble loss. In Week 9, the Chargers, they did him in good in that ball game, even though in garbage time, he salvaged his performance in terms of fantasy points. 13 in that game, 235 pass yards, a touchdown, 3 interceptions, 27 rush yards. So after coming off the bye week into the playbook a little bit more, I think Winston could surprise and get 18-20 fantasy point range. He's got decent weapons, Cedric Tillman, David Njoku, Jerry Jeudy, Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford out of the backfield. So this week, after coming off the bye in his former team at the Saints, I think he could be a decent sleeper option, available in 90% of fantasy leagues. Third and final quarterback I have is a sleepers, Drake May of the New England Patriots. Drake May out there in 87% of fantasy leagues. And I thought so far this season he's played pretty decent and a way better option than Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. So the last few games for Drake May, Week 8 versus the Jets, 23 pass yards, 46 rush yards, a touchdown before he left with a concussion. Week 9 in Tennessee, 206 pass yards, a touchdown, 95 rush yards, 2 interceptions, a fumble loss. And Week 10 at the Bears, 184 pass yards, a touchdown, an interception, 24 rush yards. So he's getting yards on the ground as Drake May. He's shown he can get out of the pocket, use his legs, and make some plays. The only thing with May, obviously, is he's turning the football over at a decent rate. His Patriot offense isn't all that great with Demario Douglas, Jalen Polk, top 2 options at wide receiver, with Hunter Henry and Rondre Stevenson in the backfield. So like I said, it's not a great offense around him, but he's finding ways with his legs and scoring multiple touchdowns a game, even with the turnovers. To have 15 or more fantasy points in the last 3 out of 4 outings for Drake May. So this week in a matchup versus the Rams, where they know they got to put points on the board, and this Ram defense traveling cross country, it could be a down game for them for all we know. So I think Drake May, if you need a sleeper in deep league, out there in 87% of fantasy leagues, and I believe it's a decent matchup this week with the Rams coming to town that do give up the 11th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. So that's a few quarterbacks I have as sleepers for week 11 of the fantasy football season.